Welcome to the latest episode of the Blazing Musket podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Benzone. I'm back this week along with our intro music after a week off. This week we're getting around to talking about the seismic changes that are coming to MLS in 2027. We thought that next year was going to be a big year in terms of U.S. soccer because of the World Cup, but MLS has gone ahead and taking things a bit further from there and has decided to completely and totally change the entire calendar of which they play under, and apparently changing their league table, playoff, everything that they could change. They decided to change all of it at the exact same time. So nothing, at the very least, they're giving us plenty of content as the MLS offseason is now just a week away, and the USL is all in its offseason as well. So getting off to a good start with things to talk about. And joining me to talk about the huge changes that have come to MLS or are coming to MLS, Sam Latoff from, of course, the Blazing Musket, and Oliver Scholes, also from the Blazing Musket. We are very fortunate on this podcast that when we want to talk about something, we don't always have to go too far to find people well qualified to talk about it in an informative and interesting way. So, Sam, Oliver, is there anything that MLS isn't doing in the next year and a half? Is there anything else that they could possibly heap on to a new schedule, a new format, how people watch changing the Apple TV format? Is there anything left that they could still possibly change?
I mean, Thomas, we saw last season the idea of being able to buy players with money instead of made up MLS crypto, like you said. So maybe we could see, there not be a salary cap and you can just spend as much money as you want. There could be a lot of changes, but no, very interesting. I got to give a shout out to MLS for fumbling the bag similar to McLaren in the Drivers' World Championship by the fact that this isn't coming out during the World Cup, the schedule change. Seems like that would have lined up perfectly. But of course, discussions and kind of finalizing things is now kind of pushed that off to the 2027-28 season. We now get a sprint season. That's a thing. Will it be sponsored by Sprint? Will it be sponsored by T-Mobile? Who knows? But there's definitely some massive changes, and it definitely affects, all of MLS, but I would say particularly up here in New England, there's definitely, I would say, even a greater effect.
And Oliver, this is going to affect USL as well. I mean, this is going to, this isn't just an MLS only change.
Yeah, I mean, immediately as soon as MLS announced this, you heard folks, Kartik Krishnaiyer at Beyond the 90, almost immediately. He must have had this piece in drafts because it was out within, it felt like half an hour, that this is, apocalyptic for USL. USL has to go to the same schedule change or it's going to destroy the whole enterprise. And, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but it is something that USL now has to think about. For a long time, I shouldn't say a long time, it's not like we've got hundreds of years of soccer history here, but for the recent past, it's sort of been irrelevant. MLS is playing on this, spring-fall schedule, so USL can play on it too. But with MLS making that switch, USL is certainly going to have to think about it, particularly as they kind of move some of these other pieces around with D1, with ProRel, and of course they have, as we discussed last week, their own CBA to renegotiate too, which also would be implicated in a conversation like that.
Well, this is, I mean, is this a challenge for the USL where, okay, maybe they see this happening and they say, okay, we need to do the same thing, but it seems like maybe they're a little too busy with a variety of other things as it is. They have CBA, they're trying to do ProRel. They've got teams that are taking a pause for a couple of years to come back when it's more convenient to play. Is this good timing for the USL? Would they, is this, I don't really see that they have the scope to take on yet another thing that they have to do.
Well, I guess there's two ways you could look at this. One is, if you're going to blow everything up from a USL perspective, why not just do it all? Change the calendar, go, get your D1 application in, bring in ProRel, go through all of this expansion, and then let things settle on the other side of that, right? Because if you do it the other way, if you say, all right, we're going to bring in D1, we're going to bring in ProRel in, let's say, 2027 or 2028, and then after a couple of years after that, we'll go and we'll make a schedule change, you're never going to let anything settle. You're never going to get on firm footing. It's always going to be disrupted, which has kind of been the long history of American soccer, right? If you go back 30, 40, 50 years pre-MLS, nothing ever really got on firm footing, and USL runs that risk. The other perspective is to your point, Thomas, which is, can you really handle this? Can you really handle a schedule change in USL? And maybe our conversation about how MLS is going to implement this will illuminate that in some way.
Yeah, I mean, Sam, this is a massive, massive risk for. I don't see how this can be looked at as. And a lot of people came out right away, and I'm not going to call them MLS fanboys. I mean, I just did, but like came out and like were unequivocally yes, this is the thing that is gonna. This changes everything, and MLS is saying we're gonna have global respect now. Like what? What is global respect? How is that measured, and why is that important?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Obviously, the big selling point on this is that you're aligning transfer windows with Europe. Obviously, the thinking is that, especially for a summer transfer window when that is, the meteor point of your season. Currently, you saw it in Minnesota when they sold Tani to La Liga. That really hurt them. They were able to still continue on the playoffs and compete, valiantly until the end, but they very much missed having a striker like that. So, and a forward like that. So, I see the perspective of, all right, we're aligning transfer windows. This will allow it to further facilitate transfers outwards. Obviously, up here in New England, we've seen that. And they've kind of had to deal with, the varying degrees of how difficult it can be. You saw the Tajon Buchanan transfer when he originally moved to Club Brugge. That was a loan back. He was able to stay for the rest of the season as New England kind of hoped to continue on in what was one of the, better seasons that they've had in its entire existence. But you also run the risk of a team not willing to do a loan back and you're losing a player. And so now MLS organizations are facing the question of, do we cash in at the highest point of value to be able to sell a player, they get their dream move to Europe, and we get as much money as possible? And doing that, do we sacrifice our season and our playoff abilities? So I get it from that sense. It's interesting from, maybe an incoming transfer landscape, in the fact that now maybe similar to a league in Turkey and other leagues, if you kind of extend beyond and have different windows beyond the traditional transfer window, you might be able to make some deals happen that otherwise wouldn't have. I think Wilfred Zaha is probably a good example of that, and there's probably plenty of others as well. But MLS is still going to extend the transfer window by a week, so there's going to be that 1 week where maybe you can a deal falls apart and you're able to swoop in. But I think it could be an interesting kind of thought experiment to see how this affects, the inbound transfers of some key, star-studded players, and if deals that might have happened before will now be easier, or if there could be some difficulties. But besides that, it is a massive risk, and I think I remember when news first broke and I wrote about it. I would say it's pretty much a sink or swim moment for MLS, in the sense that MLS has gathered its footing. It's established itself as maybe a secure league, if you will. There's no worries of it folding, I would say. But now it's trying to progress into one of, probably ideally for them, top 5 league, but more realistically, probably closer to the top 10 league. And, it's very interesting, like talking to people who maybe don't necessarily follow MLS. I was talking about this, and they're like, well, MLS isn't Europe. MLS isn't one of these top leagues, and it'll be very difficult for them to become a top league. So I don't get why they would do this. But MLS is really buying in that they'll be able to align these transfer windows, that it will somehow give it, a reliability or kind of more higher standing within other leagues. And maybe it's so funny that MLS is, almost a typical American sports league, and now it seems like it's trying to go away from that. That's really the bet that they're making. And when you look at a market like New England, it's very much going to suffer. MLS has talked a lot. 91, 92% of games are going to fall within the same window.
That's bunk.
Oh, it is. And, Ben Wright and others have really done a job of basically showing that that's not going to be the case. But to put it simply, the Revolution, I believe, would be playing games right now. It was 30 degrees at Gillette Stadium last night for a KG game.
I almost killed myself getting out of my car.
I don't blame you, man. So like it's freezing. Right now you deal with freezing rain, heat, snow. For markets like here, Minnesota's, the probably northeast, middle America, It's going to be a
Canada.
very interesting, Canada as well. Interesting to see just how the fans react to this. If you have a high performing team, fans might show up through thick and thin. But if you're having a poor performing team and it's 30 degrees and it's raining sideways, you might have a little bit more difficulty packing a stadium. And for a stadium like Gillette Stadium that's seen, increasingly high attendance numbers, again, those attendance numbers are what you make of them. You're really potentially losing out on that gate receipt in order to now have a higher viewed product and a product that might be better off for television and for people's viewing habits, but not for the fan that really wants to go out and go to a game.
All right, so this is the thing. So we can maximize money to be made on player sales, and that's going to offset the loss of lost ticket sales for a third of the league. So that seems to be, hey, the money is all we're still gonna come out ahead. So it's no big deal whether we get it from ticket sales, whether we get it from player sales. We don't really care, right? Money's money, and if we can get more people to watch this on TV, that seems to be something, or watch it on Apple TV. It seems to be something that they're interested in. But Oliver, this has always been my problem with U.S. soccer and a lot of people that watch it, is this almost like obsession with wanting to be like respected by people in Europe, or for people that live in America that only watch European soccer. They can't lower themselves to watch MLS, and I really don't think that the reason that things are this way, it's not the schedule. It's just it's in America. And there's people that don't associate soccer with America. There's certainly a level of resentment that we have. The biggest basketball league in the world, the biggest hockey league in the world, essentially the only football league in the world. Like we baseball, right? We dominate all these other sports. We dominate women's soccer, and they're not going to give American soccer respect no matter what they do. I don't see how this is all tied up in, like, I've never heard a Euro snob saying, well, they play in the summer. I mean, how serious can you really take a league that plays in the summer?
I think there's a clear winner and a clear loser here, and everyone else, all the other stakeholders are kind of in the middle. And Sam kind of identified one of the losers being the fans of these northern teams, right? New England, Chicago, Minnesota, the Canadian teams. Probably throw the two New York teams, Philly, Cincinnati, Columbus, Nashville in there as St. Louis as being potentially kind of in that same bracket. But the clear winner here to me is the players, right? It's about the free movement of the players and the free movement of labor, because we've heard sometimes more explicitly than others. I think FC Cincinnati is one team that has been pretty open about the fact that they don't want to contemplate those sales, right? They don't want to sell players during the middle of their season, and that impedes the ability of those guys to pursue playing the soccer at whatever the highest level they are able to is, right? It impedes that ability. So I think this is a big win for the free movement of players for a couple of reasons. One, the clubs are just going to be more willing to sell, but European clubs are going to be more interested. Like right now, if you're in the Bundesliga and you're thinking, oh, there's this guy playing in Cincinnati who's kind of good, and we think he could translate well over here, but we'd have to deal with that. We'd have to deal with America, and we'd have to deal with this league. And you know what? Let's not. We can find an equally good player who's playing in Greece right now, and we can not have to worry about any of that nonsense, right? We have to do a loan back. So I think there is that component where it's not just that clubs in Europe will necessarily take MLS more seriously, but they'll be more willing to engage in business in a way that I think hasn't historically mattered up until 5 or 6, 7 years ago. Like, how many MLS players were even really going to be making that move in a perfect world? There weren't many. Right. The list was very short.
Yep.
But that has changed. And I think one of the drivers of that is that is changing, that you have guys, Tani Olwesi this summer is a great example, but there's this growing list of guys who could go play in a mid-tier Bundesliga club or a mid-tier La Liga club or in, the Eredivisie or wherever it is, right? And it's getting harder and harder for MLS to do the kind of business it wants to do because there's so much disjuncture between the calendar. I don't know that European fans care. right? Like if you're a real soccer sicko, it's great that there's soccer on all year, right? Like I love the fact that I can turn on my TV basically any day of the year and somebody's playing, right? It's the J League, it's the A League, it's Liga MX, it's whatever, right? I love it. I watch soccer, I don't know, probably 200 days a year, something like that, probably more than that. And so I don't know that like real hardcore soccer fans in Europe care about that or take MLS less seriously or whatever. They see the guys come over and they perform or they don't, in whatever league it is. And that's kind of the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? If the guy can perform, he can perform. It doesn't matter where he came from. But I think when we go back to kind of like the risk, as Sam pointed out, I think the risk is that fans, like the casual fan, it's not about the hardcore fan, right? It's not about like people like me who have done stupid things like go to Hartford, in 34 degrees and literally sleeting sideways to watch this team play because I'm a sicko like that, right? And because I just love watching soccer. I'm not the problem. I'm not potentially the problem here. The problem is that I was one of like 75 people in the stadium that day when that happened, right? A 5,500 seat stadium. I went up to a preseason game at Gillette last season, and Hartford was playing the Revs. And yeah, okay, it's preseason, right? Like we're not expecting huge crowds, but there were, I don't know, maybe like 150, 200, 300 people in the stands. I know you were there too, Sam. Like it wasn't well attended. And that was in, I think, late February or early March, something like that. Like that's the window that we're talking about, is that the hardcore fans are going to show up. But the casual fans, the people who've got 3 kids and they're coming for a nice night out or whatever it is, and I don't, and it's maybe more of a concern in USL than it is in MLS, like they're not gonna come, right? Like I'm not gonna bring my 10-year-old when it's, 27 degrees if I can do something else.
Yeah, and Oliver, to your point, I would say that, largely if you look at a stadium like Gillette Stadium being in Foxborough, kind of away from like that main central hub of Boston, if you will, that city hub, there definitely is a large chunk of the fan base that might be that, family of 4 or family of whatever looking to have that night out. And I think, again, kind of going back to, we before the show, we were talking about, the Apple deal. It really seems like MLS is buying in on, its streaming ability, its ability to capture the worldwide fan. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. MLS seems like it, has the potential to opt out of the Apple TV deal. What could come next? But we're already seeing it in the fact that Apple TV, it used to be its own separate subscription, MLS Season Pass. Now it's just going into the Apple TV model. So now if you subscribe to Apple TV, you're going to get, MLS, we're going to get F1. So as much as, again, it's a streaming platform, you are going to maybe get someone who stumbles upon it. I was talking with someone at my church and like he mentioned like, oh yeah, I watched the Western Conference final because I have Apple TV and I haven't been able to watch MLS games, but then I saw it. I'm like, oh, Thomas Muller's playing. So I think there's going to be that. It's like Oliver mentioned, the in-person experience seems like it's getting sacrificed. You're going to have the sickos. You're going to have the people who are members of the supporters group and are really hardcore fans. But if you're looking to continue to expand your fan base, if you're looking to make it worthwhile to attend a home match or to attend a live game, when you look at those winter months, and I mean, obviously when you talk about the weather, you also do have to contemplate, it's constantly getting hotter. You have to worry about, in the peak summer months, playing in Florida and, Texas, it's going to be very hot as well. But especially being up here in the north, you always instantly go to the fact that like the Revs could be playing in snow. And when your captain doesn't like playing in snow, it's probably not the best idea. So I think overall, it just seems like the TV, almost that virtual, that number, being able to brag about how many people are, viewing your product is being kind of overemphasized, being prioritized compared to the likes of, that hardcore fan who's been supporting a team through thick and thin, who's willing to go out there, no matter the weather. They're kind of being forced to be even more of a hardcore fan and almost prove their fandom compared to, now it's going to be a great streaming product for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Thomas, I just wanted to jump on this because I do think like when you look at MLS, right, the Apple TV deal is paying, I think, like $275 million a year, something like that. And they've got out of that deal early, right? They're getting out of that deal 3.5 years early so they can renegotiate it so they can chase more money. And the reason for that is if you look around at the landscape, that $275 million a year is nothing, right? Every other American sports league has media revenue above $1 billion a year, right? We don't need to talk about the NFL and their $10 billion a year. We're not going to get there with soccer, right? But every other league is there. You look at the Premier League, right? I think between their domestic and international rights, it's like $4.5 billion a year in TV rights. And MLS is sitting here on $275 million a year. And so I think they're looking at this as an opportunity to massively grow that piece of the pie, because on the flip side of that, MLS is extraordinarily dependent at the moment on that gate revenue, right? It's something in the neighborhood of 40% of MLS revenue comes from people showing up and buying tickets, whether they're season tickets or, single game or whatever. If you compare that to the NFL, the NFL is under 20%, right? It's like 16, 17% of their revenue is that part. And so for MLS, I think there is a vision that like the ceiling is higher here, right? $275 million a year in revenue is nothing. The numbers we could be chasing are much, much larger. Now, I don't want to get like down into a rabbit hole on like the conditions of late stage capitalism and why it's bad that we're chasing like these increasingly high television revenues, right? But I do think that's kind of the reality, right? Is that MLS is saying there's potentially $1 billion a year on the table here, or something close to $1 billion a year on the table, 4 or 5 times potentially what we've got right now. And we're never going to get that. We could sell out every single game at every single stadium, and we would never get that kind of revenue, right? That we could get by selling the TV rights.
But this is the thing, like, who's going to pay $1 billion? This is like coming up with a video game and saying, hey, there's $2 billion spent annually on video games, and if we can get 0.5% of that market, that's a boatload of money. Like, who's going to pay $1 billion for MLS, right? And not necessarily because of the quality of the league, but like, let's be honest. Once you get outside of the top 4 leagues in the world, very few people outside of that country watch that league. Like, yes, the entire world watches the Premier League. They are not going. The Premier League has it all. They have all the best players, the best coaches, the most money, the longest history, right? They have their revenue from ticket sales is minuscule. For some of these teams, it's practically nothing, because they're making money, just insane amounts of money, but they hands over fist with their TV deals, but they still sell out their stadiums. So when you tune into a game, that audience that is there makes it more enjoyable for the audience that is watching on TV. When you're listening to the 1,500 or 2,000 away fans, right, like singing and chanting, right, like for an hour and a half, that comes through, that in-stadium experience comes through on the television. If I'm sitting at home watching the Revs in November, December, February, and March, and there's 4,000 people there, nothing is going to resonate through to the TV to the person that is watching. The other thing is, too, I was thinking about, if you have a certain amount of time in your life that you are prepared to dedicate to soccer, MLS has now put themselves in a fall to spring schedule, which means they are now going to go up against regular season European games, the group stages of the Champions League, the Europa League, the Europa Conference League during regular season MLS. And then when you get into the spring, now you're going up against, the business end of these league campaigns, the quarters, semis, and finals of all the European. Those are going up against the same part of the MLS season. And there's no part of the MLS season that is now separate from the European season. And obviously, look, people can say, well, yeah, but MLS plays at night, and, the European leagues play during the day. But most people on the weekend do have to do other things besides watch soccer. So now if I can watch 2 games on a Saturday, right, people are going to continue to watch the Premier League game at 10 o'clock and the one at 12:30, and then they're going to go out and do whatever else it is that they do with their, significant other, with their family, yard work, whatever the case may be. So I just think like most people have like a capacity for how much soccer I'm going to watch. And if it comes down to it, if I've got 3 hours this Saturday and I can watch, I can watch, Chelsea against Manchester City, and that's the game that I can watch today, and that fits into my schedule, and then I've got to go and do other stuff. Or I can watch, the Revs against Chicago Fire. Like, what do you think people? They're not on at the same time, but not everyone has this capacity to watch 8 hours of soccer every Saturday and Sunday. So I think that is part of the risk as well. Like, there's no time where MLS, if you really, really want to watch soccer, Oliver, like you said, I used to watch, when I didn't watch MLS, I used to watch the Mexican League, because, hey, it's on at night. I've already watched 4 games today. I have, I was at a phase of my life where I had no life. I had nothing better to do. So, whatever. I'll watch a 5th game today, and I'll watch Cruz Azul. But most people are not going to watch 5 soccer games in a Saturday. So I don't know. I don't know who they're going after. The soccer sickos that don't watch MLS anyway are all of a sudden now they're going to watch it. So that to me is very, it's very confusing. And they've also put themselves now in regards to like the NFL, they're putting regular season MLS games up against the NFL, which destroys everything in its path in terms of sports, as does college football, by the way. College football is a very close second. So now you're asking people to contemplate college football on Saturday or MLS week 5. And I feel like they're going to lose out. Whereas if it's MLS quarterfinal, I'm going to watch this thing that is possibly never going to happen again, or a regular season college football game, that's a little different. But regular season college football against regular season MLS, again, the casual fan, it's no problem. That's not even a decision that has to be made. They're going to watch football.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I feel like maybe in this conversation, maybe I just haven't been listening, but like European football, soccer just hasn't been talked about at all. A lot of the conversation for MLS has been, oh, we're not gonna, we're no longer gonna be competing. That argument you make, Thomas, that oh, we're gonna have our most important games going up against college football and regular season, or NFL regular season games. That's been the argument that they need to change, which is funny. It's that we need these most important games to not be getting eyeballs pushed away from them. But I think you make a great point in the fact that you're now not just competing with American sports in the sense of NFL, NBA, and then obviously too, I'm a hockey fan. You have NHL, but you're going to be competing against the Champions League. You're going to be competing against the Premier League, La Liga, and I think that might be just an overlooked part of this change. Is that great? You're getting away from the NFL, but you're now trying to compete with leagues that no offense to MLS, are superior quality in terms of its history and the players and what have you. So again, it goes back to that wanting to be regarded as one of those top leagues. I mean, this is again going to be the moment where we're going to find out if they can handle going up against the big leagues. I would probably say that's a rough bet, a losing bet. But it really seems like that might have been. I'm really intrigued to. I wish I was a fly on the wall to see when all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we're not going to have to go up against NFL. When there's someone in the room's like, yeah, but now we have to go up against like Man City, Man U.
Sport that we play, right? I mean, like, yeah. And again, I get it's not the same time of day, but it's just
not. You only have so many hours, Thomas.
Right,
only so many hours.
Right, and not the 3 of us, not
That's
the
right.
people that
normal people out there who have lives and do things, right?
Normies out there,
right? Like give me a quick example, like motorsport, right? Next week, the F1 season comes to its conclusion, and then there's this horrible 6-week period of which there is no. Right, there's no F1, there's no IMSA, there's no IndyCar, there's not even any NASCAR, which I don't really watch, but like there's nothing, right? But if any race pops up in that window of time, like there's like a golf 12 hours on December 12th through the 14th, I'll probably watch that. Normally I wouldn't watch that because I don't even know what series that is. It's like a short it's like a short season thing that they do in the Middle East and Asia. I have no interest in watching that at like 7 o'clock in the morning. But if I have to go 6 weeks with absolutely no motorsport at all, I'm left with watching a series that I've never heard of in a different country, or watching like the 1995, Japan Grand Prix, which I already did last winter. So I'm not going to do it again.
You look
Like,
at it, a great kind of case study into that too is, when you remember COVID happened, and sports shut down, I will gladly admit I was up at 1 and 2 in the morning watching K-League, Korean baseball, just to get my fix. So I think there's a good point in there that if there's a gap in sports, if there's a gap in events taking place, you can eat up that gap and gain fans there. So it's going to be really interesting to see that the MLS doesn't have that gap anymore. There won't be, that break where, all of Europe is, waiting to be in its postseason and is now, building up into the preseason. MLS is just going to be following that same calendar. And how will it be able to gain fans when you now have to compete against, some of the largest clubs in the world?
Yeah, and Oliver, this is the other thing too. Two things. So one, the other part of this too is the fall spring schedule. That's one thing that people are going to have to get used to. Two, people are going to have to get used to. I think it's like a 6-7 week break in the middle of the season, like that. That to me, that is the most un-American sports thing that has ever happened. Like the season is just going to stop and then pick back up again 6 or 7 weeks later. Like, so I again, the non devoted hardcore soccer fan, like how are they going to, how is the league going to overcome this? How are they going to wrap their heads around, you're getting into the season, you're getting into the flow, the team's home 1 week, they're away next week, things are starting to happen, the playoff picture is starting to come into place, and then they stop for 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Obviously the Bundesliga does something pretty similar to that, has a pretty lengthy break, right, in kind of the winter. But that's been the case for a long time in Germany, and everyone's sort of used to it, and that's how things are. And also there aren't really any other competitors, right? Like, I don't know what the other major sports are in Germany, but there's not really a close second to soccer.
That's a good point.
Think were it me, right, I would approach this. I would say we're actually going to have an Apertura and a Clausura, right? We're actually going to have our cake and eat it too. We're going to have our the first half of the season, and there's going to be a champion, and we're going to have, a Ligilla or whatever. We're going to have a champion, and then we're going to have the spring, and we're going to have another champion, and then we're going to have the final big championship, which is the two champions playing each other, right? And that's pretty tried and true, right? You see it in different ways, in different forms across Central and South America, right? Mexico does that. Brazil, Argentina have all these places have different ways of kind of making that happen. And that actually might be a really elegant solution to this problem, because you would then get, these games that we're playing in October, November, early December up against the NFL, up against college football, they mean something, right? You're going to have this mini champion, right? These are knockout games if you're getting into that kind of mini postseason or whatever it is. And then it's a natural break. Chicago just won the Apertura. Awesome. Great for them. We'll see you all in February. And then you start up again, and the games you're playing in February are, maybe kind of low stakes, and so you don't get great turnout for them. Or it doesn't matter that the Revs are on the road, for a couple of games in a row or something like that. And then when you wind up in the late spring, early summer, and you're up against, the business end of the Premier League season or the business end of La Liga, you also have not just your Clausura, but also your, Champion of Champions game coming up, right? So I'm not saying that's what they're going to do, right? They've made no announcement to that effect, but it would make sense. You think about kind of the North American, Central American, South American soccer context. You think about where a lot of the players are from and where a lot of the coaches are from who end up being, in the leagues here in MLS. Maybe that's a way they could kind of square this circle a little bit and manage to have some success with this split calendar, because I absolutely I'm really concerned about what that break in the middle of the season is going to do if there isn't a way to market it as some kind of this is good, this is natural, this is like a normal thing in soccer, because people are just going to turn around and be like, well, I can watch the Premier League literally the day after Christmas, right? I can watch, there's no break. There's never a break. I keep going. Why am I going to watch MLS?
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
Sam,
just
go ahead.
real
But
quick.
like,
Yeah, real quick, Thomas. Just that point of this isn't something that's known in American sports is so key. Again, if you go to these places in Europe, they know about the breaks. Again, the Bundesliga is probably the best example, but there's even kind of the typical kind of Christmas break that you get in Europe. But for American sports fans, that really isn't the case. I mean, you have games on Thanksgiving, Black Friday. I mean, there's probably going to be soon there will probably be games, if they're not already, for the NFL on Christmas and on
Well,
Christmas
the
Eve.
NBA historically has played on Christmas, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
correct. So I believe the NFL last year added some games, but it's like even these top American leagues are playing, throughout the holidays, throughout this winter break. So I think it's going to be really tough for this American sports fan to comprehend that a league just going to go on break, that there's just going to be a complete pause. And it just goes back to that point. I mean, the MLS could have really continued to just be its own unique league, continue to grow, but it really wants to be this top, almost regarded as a European league. And so it took this chance, and it's going to be interesting to see how it pays off.
yeah, because they're not. I mean, they're not in Europe, so it works for the Bundesliga. But the winter in Germany is different than the winter in at least a third of the country over here. And that's the other thing too, is like the size of the the United States and Canada. If you bring the Canadian teams in all the way down to Miami, you're not talking about two countries that exist in a similar climate. I mean, it couldn't be further. It couldn't be any more different. Whereas in Germany, but I understand, there's northern, southern, but like they have round about the same type of winter. So they're all kind of dealing with the same thing at the same time. That's not the case here. Miami, the worst time to play down in Miami is the summer for sure, because the humidity is totally insane. But at the same time, most nights in July and August, once the sun goes down, once a Revs game kicks off at 7:30, the sun, most of the stadium's in the shade. Like, it's hot, it's humid, but the worst part of the day is over, right? So it's just two totally different types of climates, pretty much at any point during the year. But Sam, I mean, this not being an American thing, like, and I'm not saying it's like pick on casual fans either, but like, that's what most people are, because they have a life outside of soccer, or they have a life outside of sports. Like, are they even going to know what season it is? Like, when they show up to a game, like, is there going to be like an understanding of like, well, what season is this? Like, what season are we even in? And that all aside, before they even get to that, they also have to do this ridiculous mini season in the spring of 2027. So like, this to me seems like a very well thought out opportunity to drive people away from your league by doing a 2-month break in 2026, a mini season that they're doing just because they have to, basically, and it couldn't be any less meaningless, and then switching into a totally different format with another break. Like, how are people supposed to keep track of all of this if they don't follow MLS, week in and week out?
Yeah, I mean, I think also too, obviously we're touching a lot on the casual fan because MLS is looking to grow, and the best way to grow is to attract the casual fan. So I think, when it comes to maybe picking up on the seasons, maybe just the NBA and kind of NHL format will help because, that is a season that takes place over multiple years. But I think, they really messed up in the fact that there's this random sprint season. Again, should have been, after this World Cup, you build off the World Cup. It's like, hey, MLS, we got a new calendar. We're going to be this rough, big league. Everybody take us seriously, but they weren't able to do that. And I think when you just look at the sprint season, I mean, ever since it came out, I've been joking. The Revs are going to win the MLS Cup in 2027, and every single team is going to be like, this doesn't count. And it's going to be hilarious. It's going to be like, everybody jokes about, the NBA championship won in the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be regarded like
or the
that.
MLS is back tournament, right?
Oh no,
Yeah.
now that's history, friend.
Yeah.
But It really is interesting. Obviously, you have to worry about retaining talent and being like, hey, we're going this new schedule. Also, by the way, heads up, the labor negotiations have to still go down in order to figure out how contracts are going to work and how, players are going to be compensated and what have you with the schedule shift. I get that you have to keep them here because what else are they going to do? Are they just now going to sit on their hands because MLS decided to change the league? Probably not. And if you have a mass exodus of talent, that would greatly hurt. I just wish that there was some sort of, even if we're extending, the season leading up to it, just so that, the season goes longer, so there's less of a wait. I just wish there was something besides literally like 14 games that will just, at the end of the day, not matter. Like, if it simply came down to games mattering, I don't think there would be this season. But they have the responsibilities to the streaming platforms, sponsorships, all the money stuff. They have that responsibility, and to the players, because if they weren't able to play, that would pretty much, hurt their career. So I get it from that standpoint, but I think the sprint season is going to be chaos trying to introduce to a casual fan. Hey, you know how we had the season that lasts, 20, 30, however many games? Now we're just going to have 14, and that's going to mean the same exact thing as, the first ever MLS Cup champion or, whoever wins the upcoming MLS Cup. Those 14 games and however the playoff system works, that's going to be the same thing, which I think will be very tough for hardcore fans to grasp in the sense of we don't believe you, and for casual fans being like, how did you come to this decision? How is this all supposed to work?
So I will say I agree that like hardcore fans are going to be like the sprint season is whatever, right? But I wonder actually if this is in some ways like the last gasp of what MLS was when it first came into being in the 90s, right? When they were like, we're going to be an American soccer league, right? And they had the weird approach to taking penalty kicks, right? If everybody remembers that. And they had all of this, there was all of this kind of stuff, right? That was like, we're not going to be like Europe. We're going to be a little bit different. And in some ways, this is the last thing of that. If we're going to the European calendar, there's nothing really left to distinguish MLS as kind of like a uniquely American soccer league than, to make it distinct from the Bundesliga or La Liga or whatever. It's just another one of these kinds of leagues. And I wonder if this sprint season isn't in some ways the way to sell it to casual fans is like, here's this insane thing that's happening. Like, this is just going to be bonkers and it's going to be nuts, and tune in. It's short. You don't need much of our attention. Right, you can stop watching the last season of Severance or whatever. You can focus for a really short period of time to watch this totally nutso thing that's going to happen in American soccer, and it's going to be so much fun. And I don't know, like MLS doesn't feel like it has that crazy energy that it had in the 90s anymore, right? It's much more staid, it's much more corporate, it's much more, again, I said this the other week, like we've got our strategic plan in a drawer and we're following it. But it is, in some ways, it feels like a little bit of that last gasp of the craziness of American soccer, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're gonna be normal in the future. We're gonna be like everybody else, and this is the last thing we're doing that's weird. And I think in that, for casual fans, like, I know ESPN loves that stuff, right? Something totally insane is happening in soccer. That's the only time it gets any coverage, right? And there's going to be all sorts of insane stuff happening in this, or I assume, just because of the nature of it, there's going to be all sorts of insane stuff happening. So just do it, have fun with it, get some eyeballs on the product, and then it's going to be normal in the future, and who knows what happens. But this does feel like a little bit of the last gasp of that.
Yeah, and I wonder too with USL, is there a chance to like market itself as like the real American league, the last bastion, of American sports when it comes to soccer? Because, it could still kind of differentiate itself from, MLS and, the European calendar and what have you. I'm really interested to see just how USL, quote unquote, responds, because obviously if you look at the USL Super League, I believe they do follow the European calendar. But it's really going to be interesting to see how US responds.
Well, when I asked John Morrissey about the USL Super League, I was like, hey, this is this is interesting that they're following the fall spring calendar. Is there any possibility of a team coming to New England? John was like, well, that really wouldn't work. It's just because of the climate. He goes, it's kind of a non-starter. But here we are. John Morrissey was like, well, that's crazy. 6 months later.
Well, if John Morrissey said it's crazy,
You know what I mean? To him, it was like, well, no,
Yeah.
they're not going to have a. They're not stupid. They're not going to put a. They're not going
That's
to
why
put
I
a.
need John Morrissey in the boardroom.
John Morrissey for MLS president. I think that's what we're saying here.
But this is the thing, right? So like, I feel like two things. So USL has done a pretty good job of not being whatever MLS is, right? So MLS has, all these salary rules and these silly roster designations, right? USL doesn't have any of that, right? MLS is a single entity. USL is not. You want to go out and make a kit deal with Adidas? Go ahead. You want to make one with Nike? Go ahead. You want to make one with Umbro? Go ahead. Do whatever you want. Make it. You have to make a kit deal, but you go and you figure out who you want to make that kit deal with, right? Like, so they always kind of do whatever MLS isn't doing. They are going to move to promotion relegation, which there's no indication that MLS is going to do. So that's another MLS does this. We're going to do this sticking point. And so I think they should, stick with their schedule and see what happens. Because if this ends up being something that sees MLS attendance drop by, 10, 15% even, those people are still going to be looking for soccer games to go to in May to a certain extent, because that's when the playoffs are going to be for MLS. June for sure, July for sure is a big month. There's still going to be an interest. My wife and I mean, we plan our yearly road trip around how many and we take it in June, July, because the weather's fantastic. And part of the plan is, okay, well, how many things can we do and how many soccer games can we go to while we do it? So I think that USL has an opportunity here to continue to be the opposite of, of whatever MLS is. So yeah,
Thomas, I agree, because I think one of the challenges that USL has had in the last few seasons has been, if MLS shows up in your town, your USL team goes away.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes that's a direct correlation, like it was in St. Louis. And other times it's a direct effect, like it was in San Diego, although there's not quite the same direct correlation. But we've seen that happen kind of over and over again. And the worry that Indianapolis or Detroit or Sacramento or Phoenix is the most recent one, like that an MLS team will show up in that market and then your USL team is gone. And I wonder if the schedule offset here actually benefits USL. That it's easier to say, well, it doesn't matter if a MLS team comes to Phoenix, because we could still have Phoenix Rising playing in USL, because there's enough of a schedule offset that we can absorb that, right? And so maybe there's a benefit to USL in terms of some of those, that competition effect that has actually become kind of one of the big elephants in the room as far as the future of that league is concerned.
Yeah, and like you guys both said, I always really appreciated some of the kind of the quirky, silly stuff that MLS did. Like, I've always looked at, and I know not everyone feels this way. Obviously, MLS doesn't feel this way themselves, but like, I've always just kind of felt MLS is it's unless you're a Revs fan, it's fun. It's just a fun league to follow. They have playoffs. The playoff system doesn't really make any sense. Whatever, who cares? They let 2/3 of the league in, which is, again, absurd. But hey, what the hell? It keeps things interesting. They have, these designated player spots and U22 spots, all this complete, total made up nonsense. But again,
rules that you don't have to follow if you want to sign Leo Messi, by the way.
Right. But it gives, there's stuff to talk about, and it's interesting, and we kind of laugh, like the MLS crypto, like we kind of laugh about that. Like, it's fun. Like, again, it's like it's just kind of a fun, enjoyable league to follow along with, and there's very rarely any like harsh consequences. You miss the playoffs? Don't worry about it. It's no problem. We'll probably make the playoffs again next year. We do the exact same thing we did this year, and we'll come in 10th instead of 14th, and everything's great. We don't get relegated, so no big deal. And and the Revs have, had decent attendance considering how poor they've been, the last 2 years. So I don't know. Oliver, I think it's a really good point that MLS has always kind of been this weird thing. And now, well, if you're not weird anymore, then you're just like everybody else. So, why?
If you're just like everyone else, I can watch good soccer. Like, I can get, this isn't the 90s.
Right, yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
I remember, in the 90s, like, there was nothing on my television, right? And I think Fox Soccer finally got like one Premier League game a week, right? Starting in like 1997 or something like that I remember. I mean, I probably got the details on this wrong. It's just my recollection. But now, like, I can put on ESPN Plus on a Saturday and I can watch like 5 European leagues, right? I can watch like 4 Bundesliga games if I want. So I want to watch good soccer. I got my pick. I am spoiled for choice.
Yep. Yeah.
There's to your very earlier point, Thomas, like what is MLS offering in this ecosystem? I don't know. I mean, I'll probably still watch MLS games because, as I said, I'm a sicko and I'll watch what's on. So if it's Miami Nashville on, a Thursday night, awesome. But I don't know if that's a business model.
Sam, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so going all the way back to the beginning. We'll talk quickly about the new league, the new format, and then we can wrap up. Oliver, if you think you can hang for 5 or 6 minutes,
I can hang for 5 or 6 minutes to talk about this crazy new league format.
Sacrificing his own personal life for the benefit of all of you listening to this show. Going back to like the players coming and going and all that stuff. I feel like if they put up 15 to 20% more money in the salary cap, then maybe those players would be less wanting to leave because they're able to pay them more. The quality of the league goes up just that much more. And then all of a sudden it's like, is going to Belgium really, like, is that really an improvement for you? Are you really going to get that much more money? No. Is that really much more of a prestigious league? Not really. It's in Europe, but other than that, it's just the Belgian league, right? It's where players that really can't cut it in the Premier League anymore go to start to move down a level. Anyway, so I just kind of felt like that's part of it too. And the other part is Vancouver's playing in an MLS Cup final with Thomas Muller, who joined mid-season. That's a phenomenal story, right? Not saying they wouldn't have made it anyways, but they probably wouldn't have. So this guy, you're an MLS team. You can get to the middle of the season. You've got an open DP spot, or you can get an open DP spot, and you feel like, hey, you know what? We're 5th, 6th place. We're pretty good. We're one. Normally we wouldn't go for a Thomas Muller, but this, you know what? If we get this guy in, we might be able to go all the way. So it does give teams that opportunity to go and get a player in mid-season that has just had, he's just had 4 weeks off, and he comes back, plays himself into form. And Muller's been, he's been nuts. So I think if you look at the growing the league and getting people that live in the country that the league is in to watch it, they could have gone that way. And instead, they've gone maybe another way. Anyway.
Yeah, I think too, when you think about it just from looking at an American sports fan, I mean, the trade deadline is something that everyone's familiar with when it comes to, all major sports here in the United States. Like that Thomas Muller deal was just a trade deadline deal. MLS maybe has to do a better job of marketing its, transfer deadlines, whether it's the current deadlines or, what's to come. But I think, to your point, that's easy for, a casual, American sports fan to kind of understand the fact that, players being added mid-season. It's a lot more, maybe kind of foreign to, the casual sports fan for your entire transfer windows to, the main one being kind of, before the start of the season. And then obviously you do have the summer transfer window where things can really pick up. But, it's really interesting. MLS just seems to be weighing the options of, do we keep being unique or do we kind of have this uniformity to the rest of the league? And, talking about old MLS, please bring back the old-fashioned penalty kicks. If we can somehow get goalie wars more frequently shown, I would greatly appreciate it. But I think just overall, as it's been talked about tonight, MLS is moving towards trying to be just another soccer league versus being a unique soccer.
Yeah. And on that, last thing here, Oliver will give you the first word on this one. They're going to switch the format to what has been referred to as a single table, sort of. It's a single table with divisions. Therefore, to me, that disqualifies it as a single table because single tables don't get divided up into divisions. So they're now going to have a single table in a way, and then they're going to have, 16 divisions. So you play everybody in your division twice, and then you play everybody else once. So, Oliver, first of all, can you call this a single table if you divide it into 5 separate pieces? And what do you think that this part of it was necessary to go along with this move, changing the league's format? Once again, where they changed the playoff format every 3 years.
I think in some ways this actually feels like a little bit more of a natural evolution for MLS. That the challenge for any sports league of any description in America is that travel in this country is absolutely hellacious, right? There was a huge story in England this season about Truro having to go to Gateshead, right? Like a journey of like 300 miles or something like that. Like this was the longest journey in the top 5 or 6 tiers of English.
It drives
soccer.
out to cover Vermont green.
Right. Exactly. Right. So like this is a totally different universe where you have like 6,000-mile round trips if you have to go across country. So the nature of having Eastern Conference or Western Conference or divisions has always been, whether it's the NFL or MLS or any other league, has always been a concession to the fact that the country is just too fucking big for all of this stuff, right? It's too big to have sports teams all over the place traveling like this all the time. We hear in every league how much it wears on the players, even in the NBA, right? How much it wears on the players to fly across the country and play night after night after night like this. So I think this feels in some ways like it's an evolution away from we're a league that is not on very firm footing, right? We're a league where we really have to try and consolidate as much of our scheduling as possible and limit the number of times that New England has to go to LA, right? Or whatever it might be, right? We have to get away from that. And so we came up with these conferences, which are very natural in American sports. Everybody understands having conferences. There's nothing weird about that. But now we're looking at what is really the case, like everywhere outside of America, right? Like I don't think there's another league in the world, soccer league in the world, that has conferences like this, right? I think you could argue a little bit about like how Brazil structures their stuff. But like in general, like it's a single table. And this does feel more natural of an evolution that like we're all going to do kind of home and home, and that's the season. And then maybe we'll have playoffs on the end of that, but like home and home is the season. And we're not quite there because we're still going to have these divisions, which I think are still that concession to the fact that travel in this country sucks. And you're going to have to fly, you don't want to be flying all over the country when you can avoid it. But it's a more natural evolution towards something that resembles what soccer sort of looks like everywhere else in terms of the competitive, right? In terms of the competitive aspect of it, which I think is the key piece of this. So I mean, how's it going to work? I don't know. Like it's not. Maybe it would have been better to go all the way. Maybe it wouldn't. It's 2025. These guys aren't flying commercial in MLS, as far as I know, right? In the same way, like in USL, they're flying commercial, right? They're flying, Avelo or Breeze or United or whoever's got seats available, and it sucks. But MLS is maybe not quite in that same boat. They're using charter, so it's a little bit easier. But I don't know. I think there's something to be said for this aspect of it, but it is kind of getting lost in the shuffle alongside the bigger change.
Yeah, and I think, Oliver, you mentioned kind of Brazil's system, and when this kind of first came out, kind of reminded me of it in the sense that, Brazil's system in terms of its state tournaments that it has, it's pretty much about 5 team divisions around that. Obviously play each other. Eventually there's a championship. So that's kind of instantly what came to my mind. It seems like, again, this is a result of the United States being humongous, but also to the fact that MLS continues to grow. I mean, when you look at the early 2000s, it was pretty easy for every team to play one another. Now that is not the case. I mean, when's the last time, the Revs played insert, a Western Conference team here, the Seattle Sounders, for instance. But, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I think the bet is that this will create rivalries. This will maybe get fans maybe used to, the matchups that you're going to have. And I think it's just really kind of dealing with this problem of the country being like absolute human. I just want to get the story in because I just actually heard it. I was talking with a player and he was on a flight with a player who's not from the United States. It was from the East Coast to the West Coast. And about halfway through the flight, like worryingly, the player that wasn't from the United States took his headphones off and was like, "How long is this flight?" And he's like, 6 hours, bro. And like the player like couldn't believe it. So it's like the United States is humongous. And like imagining even on private planes, a Revs player, going from, Boston all the way flying to, Seattle's LA's like it is a significant toll. So I think this the vision system, it could be done well, it could work well, it could create these rivalries. But again, going back to the casual fan, it's going to be pretty hard to kind of get that illustrated to them. I mean, obviously you have divisions in leagues like the NFL, NBA, and NHL and MLB, but you're still playing largely, the entire league. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how MLS handles it. It is worth noting it isn't official and set in stone. It probably will happen. But Don Garber was asked about it and coming out of the owners' meetings mentioned that, nothing is set in stone. But I think, as you mentioned, Thomas, when half of your league is making the playoffs, probably should reevaluate that system. And so maybe the vision and the future of the playoffs can play into a better system. But I think it's going to be very difficult from the jump to kind of explain this all to new and maybe casual fans, which is essentially the moral of the story. MLS is going to have to get very good at explaining itself to other leagues, even though it is trying to be just like other leagues.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot that they really there's a lot that needs to be hammered out, a lot that needs to be done to try and get this right, do as best as they possibly can. But like you guys both said, though, the division thing, I actually think it makes a lot of sense. Uh, the country is way too big; it's too spread out, and now that you are at 30 teams, that does open up other possibilities. So the divisions is a nice idea, and so I think it's great. We don't know what the playoff model is going to look like. When all this plays itself out each spring. But the move to divisions, yeah, I think that's of all the things that they've done, that one makes a lot of sense given the size of the league, the size of the country. And I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see how the rest of this stuff plays out for MLS, for USL, and in US soccer as a whole. The next 2 years is going to be it's going to be pretty crazy for sure. And of course, you all know this already. But if you have friends that don't know this already, the one and only well, not one and only, the best place to keep track of all of the things that are happening in U.S. soccer and how it relates to us here in New England is, of course, the Blazing Musket. So please do continue to check out the Blazing Musket. Continue to check out Sam's work covering a little bit of everything. Oliver's work covering Hartford Athletic. Myself covering whatever I can be, pulled away from the sim racing rig to write about once every 3 months on the Blazing Musket. And if you are not already not getting this show straight into your downloads every week, please consider doing so. Please like and review us wherever you get your podcasts from. Great show this week. Oliver and Sam, thank you for coming on. Things just continue to change, and we will, of course, continue to be here to talk about them as they develop.
Thanks, everybody.